Welcome to 10th or Tuesday, episode number 24. My name is Michael Bolden, and I am joined by my good friend,
Mike Meharry.
Today is the 376th day that the GOP has failed to get rid of Obamacare, among many other things, Mike. But we're going to talk about a few other things, of course. Last week, we focused primarily on dealing with the surveillance state at the state level. And just to kick things off, I want to touch base on this a little bit further. Last week, there was a report that ICE is now tying into license plate tracking data, ALPR, automated license plate reader data, that is being collected by local law enforcement and passed up to Washington, D.C. We've talked about it in the past, going to the DEA, correct?
That is correct. The DEA has its own program, and now the ICE, I guess that's not the proper way to say it, ICE is developing it. And it's interesting to me that that they're tapping into actually a private corporation that is collecting a lot of this data from state and local law enforcement and federal agencies, not to mention from private vendors that are collecting license plate information. I think the article mentioned like repossessors and whatnot. So all this is getting put in a central database, and then this private company is allowing these law enforcement agencies to tap into this information. So the key to this is to not allow information to be gathered and shared. That's the only way to stop this.
Now, one thing that I do like to point out is that I know there are going to be some people who will certainly say, good, we want ICE to be able to track everybody everywhere because there's so many illegal immigrants, so we're okay with it. Well, and I think the same argument was made at some point in regards to the DEA, because the DEA is the one that really started this program, collecting this license plate data that they're not collecting. And in fact, the ICE report specifically said that ICE wasn't going to even be doing the collecting. So it is
Right.
state and local law enforcement in partnership with Vigilant Solutions, which is really the technology provider. Well, eventually, there's going to be another agency, maybe the ATF, and another agency, maybe the Department of Education at some point is going to want to know where everybody is. But sooner or later, all parts of the federal government is going to be participating in this. That's how I see it, and that's why I see it as very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting because obviously you're going to get people on the right, more conservative leaning, that are going to be okay with tracking immigrants. How quickly they forget that just a couple of years ago, you had the IRS targeting Tea Party groups.
Yeah.
So, the party that is in control is not going to always be in control. So you give these guys this technology now, in 4 years or 8 years or whenever, when,
Right.
Nancy Pelosi or Hillary Clinton or whoever,
President Warren or Winfrey is definitely going to use
Right.
this. They're going to the big agency when the left is in charge. I mean, the Democrats are in charge, is going to be the ATF. They're going to use this license plate data, and they're going to be able to know where everybody is at all times that's been in a vehicle. I don't own a car, but they track me other ways. But we don't want to share the data. And you mentioned something really important. As long as Mike, that the data is not being collected and shared in the first place, then they can't build this database because they don't have the resources to do the data collection in the first place. And that's why there's this bill in Rhode Island that I think is very important, from a number of sponsors. I think Blake Filippi, our good friend Blake, is a co-sponsor on this bill that would give us a brief overview of the bill, Mike.
So this is your standard automatic license plate reader bill, but they actually they put it in terms of roadway surveillance. So they prohibit roadway surveillance without a warrant. This is actually probably a stronger automatic license plate reader bill than we've seen in a lot of states, because it really does require a warrant for them to utilize a license plate reader unless it's for a specific investigation. And then on top of that, it has very strict sharing and retention requirements. So it doesn't allow them to store this information in databases if it's not related to an investigation. And it doesn't allow them to share this data with other agencies. So Vigilant Solutions would not be able to get a hold of this information ostensibly under this bill. And that means that the ICE would not. Why do I keep calling it the ICE? The ICE. It's like the Facebook.
The feds.
Yeah, the
I
feds.
mean, whatever. When one agency gets it, it ends up spilling out to all the others over time.
It goes everywhere. So by this bill would effectively prevent license plate data from Rhode Island from being put into these types of databases, because they're not allowed to retain it or share it.
House Bill 7222 in Rhode Island is an important one that we're watching. A number of other states in the last 2 years have already taken steps in this direction. It's New Hampshire, Montana, Utah, and Arkansas, and other bills that we're monitoring this year to deal with the sharing of license plate reader data is in New York and Nebraska, but we do expect to see some other bills introduced in other states. Moving forward, there's a number of bills in recent days that have actually passed important steps. For example, in Florida, the Direct Primary Care Act to expand health freedom. Mike, is that House Bill 37, I think?
That number
House Bill
rings
37.
a bell. Yes, it does. And this is one of my favorites because I'm actually doing business with a direct primary care provider here in Kentucky. They passed a law last year to incentivize and allow these types of practices to flourish. And basically what it does is it allows a doctor to establish a relationship with the patient on a monthly fee. I'll have unlimited access to that doctor for my normal routine healthcare. And this is a healthcare solution personally for me. So that's why I love these bills, because I can't afford insurance anymore. So I've had to go to a sharing group, and with direct primary care, that's really going to help me control my healthcare costs. So by allowing these to not be considered insurance, not regulated under the state insurance laws, it incentivizes that market, allows these practices to proliferate and grow, and it gives people an option, and it helps control costs. So that's really the key.
In Florida, that's House Bill 37. It passed last week, Thursday, the State House by a 97-10 vote. It's going to have to go through a few different committees on the Senate side before it gets to the Senate floor and then hopefully to the governor's desk. But that's a very positive thing. We've seen a number of states in recent years that have passed that into law, and it's a good move to see it pass this large of a step so early in Florida. The next bill that I want to talk about, Mike, is down in Alabama. You've done a lot of good reporting on sound money issues, and your work over at Shift Gold has kind of expanded on. Does everybody know that you work also at Shift Gold, or
I don't know.
Is that secret, or?
No, it's not secret. I do the blog content over at shiftgold.com, a couple of posts a day, and then I also do a weekly podcast on Friday called the Friday Gold Wrap, and just cover economics, sound money, and gold and silver news. So yeah, that's.
So a bill that's moving forward in Alabama to give us the overview. It's House Bill, what is
19.
it? House Bill 19 in Alabama.
So this bill would effectively repeals the state sales tax on gold and silver bullion. So it's a very simple tax repeal bill. And you kind of have to look at it this way. You know, when you go and you exchange Federal Reserve notes for gold and silver bullion, really what you're doing is you're changing one kind of money for another. But a lot of places don't treat gold and silver as money. They treat it as a commodity or an investment vehicle. So if you imagine if you went to the bank and you had a dollar bill and you asked for 4 quarters and they charged you a nickel tax, I mean, that's absurd, right? You're just changing one type of money for another. That's really the way gold and silver exchanging for Federal Reserve notes is. So it really shouldn't be treated as a commodity, and it should not be taxed. So this bill removes that sales tax, and what it does in effect is it incentivizes the market, allows people to get into gold and silver. It makes it easier to use gold and silver in transactions because you don't have to worry about paying sales tax to get your gold and silver. And this can ultimately undermine the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money. So this is a kind of a first step towards really taking the foundation out from underneath the Federal Reserve and allowing gold and silver to function as it was intended to, as money, instead of just relying on Federal Reserve notes that are constantly being devalued and printed out of thin air by the feds and the Treasury Department.
That's House Bill 19, which passed out of committee in Alabama, and that'll go sometime in the next 1 to 2 weeks to the House floor for further debate and consideration. The next bill that I want to talk about, Mike, is over in Indiana. It's House Bill 1137, which, as the title says on the bill or on our report, it clears way for commercial hemp market. Now, this is a little bit, it's not an easy one to understand, I think, for a lot of people. So break this down just the most basic way. This passed 12-0 out of committee in the Indiana House last week. Tell us a little bit about what this does.
So what spurred this was the use of CBD oil, which is a derivative of cannabis that has proven highly effective for treating seizures in children, along with some other medical conditions. So this isn't really something that comes from marijuana. It actually comes from hemp. But regardless, according to the federal government, according to the DEA, this CBD oil is still considered illegal. And the feds have flat out said this is illegal. Now, they're not really prosecuting it at this point, but I emphasize it is illegal. And so we have this hemp bill that was passed in 2014, or was part of the agriculture bill, and it allowed a little bit more hemp farming in certain states that already that have legalized hemp. It allows them to develop these research programs. They call them pilot programs. And under a pilot program, they can grow hemp for research purposes, but it's research only. Now, there's this whole debate about, well, you have to be able to do some marketing in order to do research. So how much marketing is allowed? And nobody really knows. It's like this complete nebulous thing. But then when you really look at what is being said by the federal government, they're essentially saying any sale commercially of hemp or hemp products is illegal. So even like when you go to your store and you see these hemp products on the shelves, technically, per the federal government, this is illegal. So
wait. Oh, this is even not for imported hemp, right?
From what I was reading, and again, it's extremely confusing.
This is regarding the Farm Bill, right? I think at least the way that I've interpreted it, and maybe I'm wrong on this, was hemp grown in the U.S. cannot be used for commercial activity. Now, like you're saying, some people are making the argument the only way you can research it is if we do some commercial so we can understand the marketing. Well, and I think the federal government, there's a link somewhere that we found that discusses this a little bit, that basically says no commercial activity. But as long as it's imported from China or Canada, of course they're still fine.
But we know, and I read an article about some situations here in Kentucky, which is not unlike what's going on in Indiana. And they made a point in the article. It was reported in the Courier-Journal, which is the paper in Louisville, Kentucky. It was reported that, our local Kroger, our big supermarket, is selling hemp products that were grown here in Kentucky that, according to the federal government, completely illegal. So, and which is funny because the Kentucky, we have a federally compliant hemp program, but apparently it's not even federally compliant.
Oh, so anyway, that's interesting. So it's made in Kentucky hemp products.
Right.
Grown in Kentucky, made in Kentucky, sold in Kentucky.
Under the research program. Right. Under the research program.
Well, that's good. I guess that shows how as soon as you open the door a little bit and people start conducting business, then the market's there and people demand to buy stuff. Right. And the more that people spend money, the harder it is to shut down these programs.
Exactly.
So that's a positive thing.
That brings us back to Indiana because there was a similar situation going on there with the CBD oil. It was being marketed, produced under the research program, marketed in the state, sold to individuals who were using it to treat their children. And all of a sudden, some state and local law enforcement agencies started coming down and prosecuting people that were in possession of this CBD oil, saying, well, it's illegal. It's illegal under the federal government. So this bill that just passed committee in Indiana, what it does is it says you cannot be prosecuted by the state. So your state and local police cannot bother you for having any hemp product, including CBD oil, but not that only, any type of hemp that is grown in the state or that is grown legally in another state. So essentially it's saying we're going to take our hands off of any hemp product. Whatever the federal government says, they can do what they want to do. We're not going to prosecute it here in this state. And of course, the federal government's not prosecuting it. And, they claim and emphasize it's illegal, but they're not prosecuting it because they don't have the resources to go after some guy that's buying hemp oil for his son.
Yeah, I think that's really what it gets down to. Most of the prosecution, the heavy lifting is being done on a state or a local level. So like House Bill 1137 in Indiana or many others that have moved forward around the country, if the state basically backs off on this, then there's really not much that the feds can do. And I think it's extremely positive. So that passed. That's from Representative Jim Lucas, House Bill 1137 in Indiana, 12-0 out of committee. Whether the leadership in Indiana, which is really, really just establishment garbage like it is in most states, whether they allow it to get a floor vote in the House is another story, but that's positive to get it moved out of committee early in the session. Another bill. Go ahead.
I was just going to say my gut on that too is there has been so much public outcry about this because there's been a lot of media reporting about, your state cops hassling some poor mother who's trying to help her kid. I think there's enough public pressure behind this that regardless of how awful leadership is, I think this has a good shot of moving forward on the House floor. So if you live in Indiana, call your state reps and your state senators and say, hey, we want this moved, because I think that pressure is there and they're feeling it. So we just need to pile on.
Yeah, that's really positive. It's just going to take a little bit of extra activism work. Another bill down in Alabama, Mike, that both you and TJ Martinell have been reporting on for a couple of years, versions of it, Senate Bill 13 to deal with marriage, just passed out of committee as well. Why don't you give us a brief overview of what's going on in that bill?
So this bill would effectively eliminate marriage licenses. So instead of having to go get permission from the state of Alabama to get married, you would just get married however you want to do it, whether you want to do it through your, through a religious ceremony or a civil ceremony, however you get married. All you have to do is take that contract to your county clerk. And I don't think they call it county clerk there, but that's what we call it here in Kentucky. But anyway, you take it down there and they will register the marriage. As long as it's legal, as long as you're not marrying your sister or something like that, the marriage will be recorded. And this includes same-sex marriages. Basically, it just takes the state out of the permission-giving part of marriage. It records it, and you're done with it.
Well, that's the whole way to deal with it. So the only
Absolutely.
reason that on one side or the other that the federal government has been able to get control is because the state governments are involved, state and local governments are involved. And when state government is involved, then the feds can say, well, government is doing this. But if it's only a private agreement that the state is actually just recording in a registry or something, which I would say, why do they even need to do that? But maybe there's an argument for it that I don't know about. But just philosophically, I don't want the government involved in a personal relationship. But this is the way to get, it's such a contentious issue. And there's no way to force one side or the other to say, okay, now I agree with you just because you've made something legal or illegal. I think the way forward is get government out, make it a personal decision or religious decision like it was forever, right?
Right, exactly. I guess the necessity of recording it comes from the fact that there's a lot of benefits and a lot of other government structure that's built around marriage. So, I guess you can make that argument from a pragmatic standpoint that it has to at least be registered and whatnot. But I think this really does effectively. It takes away the aspect that the state is allowing you to do this. It's just recording it, and I think it's more liberty ultimately, because like you said, you're getting government at least big part of the way out of the structure, and it like we said in the reporting, it nullifies both sides of this contentious argument. If the state's not giving permission, then it doesn't matter what some politician thinks about gay marriage or whatever. It's just recorded. You're done with it. You go on and live your life.
Yeah, and that's more liberty. We post a meme every year now that's a picture of the marriage of George and Martha Washington, and it basically says whatever the date was. I think it's January 6th or something, but government license wasn't needed. They got married without a license. Why do you or I need it? And I think the licensing issue, the permission slip, like on so many other issues, whether it's the right to keep and bear arms or the right to be with the person that you love, the licensing itself is what drives so many political issues, political debates, and political control over these various issues. So it's really important to get the local and state governments out of these. And Mike, I didn't really list this in our notes to talk about, but you did a really interesting report, that the last thing that I want to cover today, up in Idaho about dealing with Obamacare. And this was, someone tweeted at us last week, an AP Western Division report about dealing with Obamacare, how Idaho, this is the title of the report, Idaho will allow companies to offer insurance policies that do not comply with Obamacare. Tell us a little more about that, because just that in itself sounds great. Basically, the feds say you have to do such and such, and then the state is basically now saying, well, no, we're going to do it differently.
Right. That's exactly what they're doing. And the way I reported it, and as I was looking at how this is all going to play out, really what they're doing is they're offering more choices on the marketplace. I don't understand how anybody could be opposed to this, because they're not saying we're not going to have Obamacare policies anymore. Any insurance company that is in Idaho will still be required to offer Obamacare compliant insurance policies. But what they're going to allow, they're going to loosen the rules, and they're going to allow insurance companies doing business in Idaho to offer non-compliant. So if you want to have a, let's say it's just you and you want to have a insurance policy that doesn't have maternity coverage, because I'm assuming you're probably not going to get pregnant, then you would have that option to have a lower price policy. It would also, they're also going to allow some policies to be sold with that discriminate against pre-existing conditions. They're going to allow for some of the various requirements to be dropped. So people will have the option of buying lower cost with less coverage, but they'll still have the option of buying the higher cost with more coverage. So really it's expanding the market. And I think that if a bunch of states do this, I think it's going to be a huge problem for this Obamacare system, because
it'll be really interesting with the enforce the law types in Washington, D.C. I know Jeff Sessions keeps saying, well, we're just trying to enforce the law on marijuana. You don't like it, change the law. I mean, mind you, there isn't a single founding father that took that approach. If you just don't like it, get it overturned. So conservatives should be embarrassed by that position. But it'll be interesting to see if there's any consistency if Idaho and maybe Oklahoma. Now, is this a proposal or is it a bill proposal? I guess that's where I had only skimmed through your writing on this, Mike.
So what it is it's actually it's an executive rule change. So they're working within the insurance commissioner promulgated these rules, and from what I understand, this is what they're going to do. I mean, they're set in stone. They're setting it in motion. They've relaxed these rules. And to allow this, and apparently,
so it's happening.
Yeah, within statute, within the leeway that the insurance commissioner has to write these insurance rules, he's done this, and so we should see these new policies being written. Now, the question is whether or not the insurance companies are going to be willing to do it.
Of course. And that's the argument that people have made against the Right to Try Act for the last few years. Like, oh, this is false hope. No one will do it. But again, I think when people have the incentive to make a bunch of money out of it, there is a likelihood that people do it. And then there's people like Dr. Ibrahim Deplasand down in Texas that we've talked about a number of times, who's been treating people in defiance of FDA rules, even though I don't think he's making a ton of money out of this, but because he had 70 patients who were going to die based on what the FDA was telling him to not do. But the marijuana market is certainly a great example of this. People are buying and selling and growing weed, and they can't even get a bank account. So, I mean, they're finding ways to do this, and there's billions of dollars being traded for product and service. So maybe there will be a version, an insurance company in Idaho that is willing to do this. I mean, will Jeff Sessions, or I don't know, who would be in charge? There's no one that does enforcement on the federal level on these insurance things. It's really handled by the state insurance departments, isn't it?
The interesting thing that was brought up, and this is the question of will they have the resources to actually do this? Apparently, there is some leverage that can be applied through Medicare and Medicaid to insurance companies. They can actually be fined for being non-compliant. That was the understanding. There were some emails that were sent back and forth between the insurance commissioner and the governor and other folks in Idaho as they were trying to write these rules. So they basically decided, we're going to go ahead with this anyway. We'll see if the federal government's really willing.
Yes. Will the Trump administration crack down on the people who are offering a la carte health care plans?
That's the question. We shall see.
Well, there's a couple of questions. First of all, will companies do this? Will people buy it from them? And then what will the federal government do in that situation? And I think if some people start offering these, and if there's even just a hesitation from Washington, D.C., I think you'll see more of the same in other states. And then this is let the chips fall as they may. There's going to be a real sea change. And I think, once again, that will prove, if it plays out in this direction, that will prove that, there's a real good strategy that can be played on various things. I hadn't even thought of this approach on Obamacare over the last few years. We've been talking about this for years. And
it's kind of interesting. It is a little bit of a variation on a theme that we have talked about, how the insurance commissioners can simply stop enforcing various provisions of Obamacare. And that's basically what they're doing. I mean, they're just saying that if they're creating some rules and saying, okay, we're going to let you.
That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, we're going to let you write insurance policies this way. We're not going to enforce these laws that say federally that you can't do that. We're not telling you that the federal government might not bother you, but we're saying, hey, we're going to let you do this within this parameters and let the chips fall as they may. So it is a little bit of the variation on that theme. I think it's a little bit more specifically applied. And I damn well guarantee you that if I ever have the opportunity to buy a lower cost coverage that doesn't include maternity, I'm going to buy it, as quick as I can.
Pediatric vision care, things like that. No, I don't need to pay for that.
I guarantee you there's no more babies coming into Meharry household.
Okay, so this is very positive, very interesting. Of course, the mainstream media thinks it's crap, so that's another reason to think it's good. In Idaho, Mike, you'll link to that in our show notes. And I don't have anything to wrap up. You got anything that we should quick mention to everybody, or this is...
The thing that just went through my head, and I don't know that this is a little bit of a bunny trail, but you reminded me talking about weed. It reminds me of what they're doing up in Maine. You talk about how when the door is cracked open, people run through it. Up in Maine, they legalized marijuana last year by vote. They've had all kinds of trouble. You got a horrible governor up there who doesn't want to follow the will of the voters, so they haven't been able to get a legal structure in place. So basically in Maine right now, it's legal to have marijuana, but it's illegal to buy or sell it. So you've got this weird thing going on. So people can have it, but there's no place they can buy it. But there's a loophole that the medical dispensaries have found in the medical marijuana law, where it was illegal for them to give away samples. Well, now it's okay for them to give away samples under the law that was passed in the voter referendum. So what they're doing is they're giving away weed and charging a bunch of money for like delivery or packaging or whatever. So they've actually found a way to sell marijuana to recreational users, even though the state has drug its feet in setting up that process.
Really creative approaches to dealing with this. Basically, look for every loophole possible, encourage the market to do stuff, or just get out of the way. The market comes in and does stuff. I'm really going to be watching closely. Hopefully you are as well, what's going on in Idaho as well, because that to me is extremely interesting. And I think it's just going to take some backbone by some businesses, customers, and maybe some state insurance department heads to just move forward in this way. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for watching us here at 10th or Tuesday. We really do rely on your support to make this kind of work happen. We do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. For as little as $2 a month, you can support our effort over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/support. It really means a lot that you're watching us and that you back our work as well, so we can expand in the future. And of course, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time here on 10th or Tuesday.